And it's been another week, 2 more weeks until the premiere at the Music Box. I have a lot of color correction to do, but last week I said we were going to talk about how the entire series of the Platoon of Power Squadron has been a conversation between us as the people making it and you as the audience. Over the last 8 years, everyone who's watched the show and talked in the comments to us with their feedback has influenced and shaped the way the show has gone forward. People always ask me, do you know how the show ends? This is the same thing Stephen King kept getting with The Dark Tower. Yes, I just compared myself to Stephen King. So, it was just because it was a long process. He wrote those 7 books over many more years than it took us to make the Platoon of Power Squadron. People would always be like, well, how does it end? Do you know how it ends? Just tell me how. Like, people who had a terminal disease, who had read the first 3 or 4 books, would write him letters and be like, listen, I'm not going to make it until when you finish the series. Could you please tell me how it ends? And he would tell them no, because he didn't know. Stephen King likes to sit down and write. The story tells him where it's going. And I write that way too, except I knew what my destination was and I had some ideas for places I wanted to hit along the way. In between those things, there was all this room for conversation. Episode 1, when we uploaded them, each segment was so short. 1 minute and 22 seconds, 3 minutes and 1 second. I was doing that because I was watching vlogs, and the Vlogbrothers said you don't make a minute, you don't go over 4 minutes, or you get a punishment, you know? But when you're talking about a series, it's so annoying. And that kept coming up in the comments. People would be like, you don't need to, why are these segments so short? So I was like, okay. So I won't. Episode 2, they average out to be more about 5 minutes, 5 to 6 minutes. Episodes 1 and 2 chopped in at around the 20 to 25 minute mark, because I wanted it to be around the 22-minute mark of like sitcoms. I always called Pops an evolving serial storyline, situation, comedy, drama, sci-fi. So it was a serial sci-fi sitcom. I wanted it to be in that half-hour format, and those, in order with commercials and everything, are typically 22 minutes. And I made it for a comedy pilot competition to start with, so 22 minutes was what I was aiming for. But after 2 episodes, oh, you know, I might cut this down, like episode 3, down to keep it in the 22, 25-minute range. And people were like, you don't have to do that. This is the internet, you know? Just let it be the length it wants to be. And that's when scope creep started, when we started getting more and more into it. Episode 5. I may have said this in the updates before, I'm not sure. Tim and Ryan talked me into starting the fundraiser, and I was very hesitant. It felt weird to me to be asking people for money. It still is a little bit, but you kind of get used to it. It's like anything. Once you start doing it a couple times, you no longer feel like you're quite such a beggar doing it. You realize that people want to help participate and make this thing better. And that's what my realization was. Made the campaign live, and when that first donation came from Martha S., who is, I go to all of these various places on the internet, and everyone loves Martha.
Thanks to Martha Stroud, the first person to ever buy a ticket to VidCon.
I was listening to the Kevin Pollak chat show, and she came up as a commenter, and they were like, oh, we all love Martha. The minute she put her donation in, she was the first one to donate. I was like, oh no, now, oh, I better put such a much better episode out. People are putting money into this thing. All of a sudden, we had way more resources. Hey! Ooh, your shirt.
I know.
Liz just got home and brought me some coffee. We really went for it with 5. And that's all because I did not want to let down the people who are actually putting their hard-earned money into our little internet program. Episode 6 was probably the biggest learning episode on a couple fronts. We waited a week between releasing part 1, week, part 2, week, part 3, and I learned a very valuable lesson doing that. Don't do that. In the week that follows, people are busy doing other stuff, and the episodes of Pops, that story is meant to be experienced in a short period of time. We previously had been doing 1 day at a time. That worked. That still worked, and it still works now, even though you can watch it all at the first day by going to the unlisted links if you want. That week by week thing was a killer, and our view counts dropped and nobody cared. The diehards did, but everybody else who could have really enjoyed it didn't. After that, when we did episode 7, this one guy in the comments was like, oh, just so much better than episode 6. And I was like, what was it about episode 6 that you didn't like? Starting the comment conversation. And he was like, I don't know, it just didn't really have the same kind of verve. And I was like, I'm wondering if it's because of the way we released it. And he went back, and I didn't even ask him to, but he went back and rewatched the whole episode all at once, and he was like, yeah, no, you know what, that's a solid, fun episode of Pops. I didn't remember it that way. It lost all its momentum every week. It affected everything. It affected the way that people experienced the show. I think we lost a couple people, and our fundraiser for 7 was not successful. It affected everything. Also, 6, big lesson. I spent months. Me and Ryan and Leo spent a lot of time.
I didn't shoot you, you shot you!
And then on the big building explosion, I spent 70 hours rotoscoping the people in that frame after Leo blew up the building and I put stuff into the building. All that time. And at the end of the day, people were like, yeah, okay. Because it doesn't matter if we start blowing stuff up or whatever, however big our effects get, it's going to take us forever to do them, and they're still not going to look as good as stuff in Hollywood movies. If you're trying to push yourself to compete with the big guys on a spectacle level, you can't do it. And when I realized that, I was like, okay, we don't have to keep pushing for bigger and bigger spectacle, because no matter how big we can get, we're never going to be able to match standard effects that people can see all over the place on Netflix every second of their life, you know? The only thing that we can do is tell our story well, character-based story. All of those things happened in 6. It was a big episode of communication for me. Episode 7, the fight in that episode. That fight was a direct result of people thinking the fight in episode 2 was silly and not, action-y. So I wanted to do better with the fighting. And I was like, we can do better with the fighting now. So we hired a fight choreographer, we did everything. There's fighting in the warehouse. There's fighting in there. And all that fighting looked much better than in episode 2. But, again in the comments, people were like, pretty good. Oh, man, I wish the punch sounds were like more realistic and less like sound library-ish. And it was the quietest fight I ever heard in the lawnmower shop. Like, people weren't making hit noises, like when they get hit. And I was like, doggone it. Episode 8, what was it called? Yes, our characters did need to actually learn how to fight. But I also wanted to finally have fight scenes where people weren't being like, nitpicky. I wanted to have fight scenes where people were like, damn. Again, fight choreographers, and that's when I launched the fight alphabet. I have ADR of Eliza, Carlin, myself, and Craig going through the fight alphabet, making vowel and consonant noises to put in when they're hit. Remember?
Kind of.
Should I play a little bit?
Sure.
It's the fight alphabet. And I think the fights turned out a lot better. Like, I love this little exchange. And this one. Nobody criticized the fighting after that episode in the comments, and I was like, got there. And then once Donald grabbed the sword in the courtyard in episode 8, somebody in the comments said, oh, cool, he can have a lightning sword. I had not considered that at all. And I was like, super cool, I'm totally gonna do that. But when I did, then people were like, oh, it's just like that video game. And I had no idea. Even though it isn't a video game, it still makes sense for our character. That's something Donald would think was super cool too. So I didn't directly rip it off from another property, just from the comments conversation with the audience. That's the kind of like conversation that's happened that shaped us over this whole period of time. So you guys have been such a big part of not just the updates and like talking to me. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me week after week, but also in how the show has become the show it has become. Not just through the money helped a lot, but also through the interaction that you guys had with the show, the way you responded to things, the suggestions you had. I'm just mentioning a few here, but it's been the entire time. I read every comment that comes in. Of course, the positive and the negative are going to push and pull me in the way the show continues. Not from here, because we are 2 weeks from the premiere. at the Music Box Theater, 3 weeks from it appearing on this channel. I gotta get back to color correcting. Here's a couple videos. That's the Pops logo. Top link in the do still gets you tickets at the Music Box Theater. Bye.